And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name's Zach Allison with ATS. With me today for our ATS University session is my colleague and the Director of Customer Success, Director of Customer Experience, doer of everything at ATS, Rebeca Perullero. If you've joined us before for our ATS University sessions where it's Rebecca and I, usually it coincides with a new feature launch, key product launch, new category that's joined the ATS Spec Tool. And that's kind of one of the main purposes for today is going over some of the new products. But it's always a little bit more, application driven, more of a conversation that the two of us tend to have. If you've been with us over the last month, we've been running a series of CEU, ATS University sessions on various pipe products and the codes that tie to those for the various types of materials that are available on the ATS Spec Tool. So we'll cover a bunch of that today, kind of doing a bit of a summary on a number of those different applications, but also focusing on the pipe category in general, how specs have been written, some of the key issues that we've identified as we were reviewing these products. And if this is your first time joining us at an ATS University, thanks for joining us. My name is Zach Allison. I run our market development team. Our development team basically works with engineers, architects, design build contractors all across Canada and all across the US. We help your firm get started on the ATS Spec Tool. ATS Spec Tool, if this is your first time, it's a product selection or product configuration tool. Has about 45, 50 different manufacturers. I don't know the actual number these days. Rebecca, do you?
Oh, number of manufacturers on our system.
Yeah.
I think we're at probably closer to almost 50.
Yeah, I think we're getting up to 50. I don't think we've eclipsed that number yet, but we've got 45, 50 different manufacturers that are available on the spec tool. It allows you to view the actual product, configure any of the options, make all the appropriate selections, and then get an accurate model name and number instead of just the generic version. One of the key parts of the ATS spec tool is the fact that it is paid for by those manufacturers. They pay us directly so that they are incentivized to help us keep their product information up to date. And then we can push those updates to you, the engineers, the architects, the contractors, so that your projects, your masters are always up to date. It's one of the core fundamental aspects that we try to offer with the spec tool. Beyond the products, we also try to help you understand why you might select some of these products, where they fit, the applications that they're best in, and understanding, some of the key features, some of the key elements that might help you understand which selection, which option to make. And that's kind of what we've been covering for most of the last month. So we've had a number of different manufacturers come on, and now we are bringing on our director who has helped us launch a couple of new features on the spec tool that we're going to be kind of covering today. So this could be more of an application driven approach. Our ATS University sometimes is a product specific deep dive. Sometimes we are talking about the codes and standards. Sometimes we're talking about how do you size certain products like pumps or water heaters. And then sometimes, like today, we're covering some of the features and developments of Spec Tool while also covering more conceptual elements of, in this case, the piping world. So that's my long-winded intro. We're gonna have a little bit more time today. Usually, I have to rush through the intro, rush through the demo of the spec tool so you can understand how to find the products that we're talking about. But that's usually because our manufacturers have so much to cover. Today, we're gonna have a little bit more time to talk about actual implementation, the applications, and tying it into how you use that on the spec tool. So that's a long-winded introduction. Anything I missed, Rebecca?
No, sir.
Perfect. Well, I'll let you kind of cover the introduction and the agenda, and then I'll
Ooh.
come back in when we get into some of the product stuff.
Okay, so the goal for this next hour is to, like Zach said, kind of give a high level summary of what the pipe landscape looks like, what are some things to consider for different applications. Um, and with the rest of our series, if you end up having more specific questions, it probably was covered in some of the other webinars that we did on the specific type of pipe or that category material, however you want to think about it. So we'll start off with kind of just a high level. What are the things that you want to consider from the pipe? Then we'll kind of just reiterate what are the types of materials that are out there and maybe some pros and cons for them. And then kind of look at them holistically. What material makes sense for different applications, for different environments. I was rewatching all of the videos on each manufacturer, and I think application or like the fluid or waste that is going through the pipe or tubing, depending on the size, by the way. I realize that sometimes we call it PEX piping when really it should be called PEX tubing, if we want to be accurate and specific. But that's probably the number one thing that anybody should be looking at when they're determining the pipe material that they want to use. You need to understand what is going to be flowing through that pipe. Is there any acidity to it? Are we concerned with temperature? Are we concerned with any pressure that might be in the pipe? Because each pipe material has different temperature rates that it can handle, different pressure rates, different acidity levels. And if you don't understand what's going to go through that pipe and you choose the wrong pipe, it's more than likely going to fail. And I think we should all know at this stage that a pipe breaking is pretty catastrophic in any building.
Yeah, I remember when we first got PEX piping on, what, 5, 10 years ago. And it was shortly after there was a plastic pipe that came out in the 90s and then a class action lawsuit. And engineers were still fearful of that issue, 20 years later, for good reason. There's significant cost implications when pipe goes bad.
So we'll go into more in depth in a little bit about the different applications. Um, Same with the temperature requirements or the type of fluid. Code obviously also has a little bit to play in it. There are specific requirements, especially I think what I've seen is more around how the connections work between the pipe. That's where the majority of the kind of code comes into. Um, and then any specific requirements like if there's an issue with sound, if there might be UV exposure to the pipe. Um, there might be some individuals who are more concerned about the cost of installation because of where it's located. Um, and we'll go into those kind of just high level items to think about. So if we talk about our first material, Zach.
Yeah. Yeah. Cast iron. This is one of the newer manufacturers that joined us just in the last year or so, getting Charlotte Pipe and their whole range of pipe on. And in fact, Brian did a terrific deep dive. I highly recommend it if you're interested. I did when we first got it, I'll admit, I didn't think cast iron pipe was going to be as interesting and application driven, but we've learned a lot just over the last year. And one of the pieces that is really covered is cast iron has quite the history. It's been used in these applications for hundreds of years. Is a great example of the Palace Versailles as one of the most recognizable historical applications. And he uses the cast iron pipe to power the fountain, which is one of the coolest things that I saw in my post grad. So it was a fun kind of harken back to that. And that was back in 1664, a couple 300 plus years ago, and that pipe is still in service. So the longevity of these products is one of the key features. It's been used, obviously used in cannons to the Palace of Versailles and projects hundreds of years ago. So we know that cast iron has terrific longevity, very durable material, and that brings a ton of different advantages. Now, back then, that was using it to supply fountains, whether it be the big, majestic Palace of Versailles or your local drinking fountains. And obviously, we're not using cast iron pipe for those types of applications in anymore. We've learned a lot about the product over the few hundred years, and that's why it does not have an NSF certification. So let's be mindful of our use cases. So we've adjusted where and when we're using it. And today, cast iron is mostly used in sanitary drain, waste, and vent applications. It's used in storm drainage, can be used above and below grade. And one of the reasons that it's so versatile is not just its strength and ability to handle these applications and its durability, but also its ability to handle high temperatures. It can work up to 100 degrees C, and these are all non-pressurized applications. The cast iron itself has great pressure, ability to withstand pressure, but the system itself, tied to the MJ couplings, is what limits the pressure that it can handle. So we'll talk about the MJ couplings a little bit as we dive into the spec tool. One of the key elements of ATS spec is that we are always recommending a complete assembly. This started when we launched our toilets and our basins, where you're getting a basin with the faucet, with the carrier, with the supplies and traps and drains and everything that you need. That's true as well with our pipe, where you're getting the information on the pipe, the fittings, the couplings, even the hanger assemblies, the fire protection assemblies that we can see even in this image. And we'll talk about all those different products that all come together for piping assemblies. Also highlighted on this slide is that Edge HP and the coatings. One of the key elements of cast iron products is the coating. Even the basic cast iron pipe has a couple of different coating offerings. And I won't get into the details here. If you want to learn more about that and the specifics, Brian did a great job covering that, and we'll show you how you can find those previously recorded presentations as well. But getting into unique applications like underground parking garages, commercial kitchens where they have high degree of, fogs, the fats, oil, and greases. That grease can off gas and release highly corrosive gases into the piping. So even though the water with the fats is not necessarily highly acidic and not caustic, the off-gassing can very much corrode general piping. So between the off-gassing and temperature, that leads us to these E-coated cast irons like the Edge HP, which handles aggressive waste in a great state. These are also great in ultra low flow applications. That's a more recent use case for these coated cast iron products. The did the degree of concentration of uric acid and other debris in waste applications in these ultra low flow applications can very much lead to acidic gases in your waste and venting. And obviously, you don't need to do the entire piping assembly with this coated product, but from your waterless urinal or from your ultra low flow washroom to the stack, that leader is a great use case for this e-coated product. Um, so yeah, that's one of the many reasons that we recommend these for, applications like your commercial kitchens, your underground parking garages, or, these ultra low flow applications. And one thing that we're starting to do is provide recommendations by application with our templates, and we'll be updating our templates, and our templates will provide these types of standards so that you can easily just drag and drop from your standard into your individual project. Moving on to a couple of the other products that are commonly used for DWV, drain, waste, and vent. PVC, great application for cold water. whether that be cold water, your general irrigation, used very commonly for like French drains and things like that. But in our world with the DWV, great where you're not looking at high temperatures. The high temperature just, again, it's covered in more detail in the previous presentations, but obviously PWC reacts quickly to high temperature spikes and can lead to expansion contraction that will be affected, and obviously supporting it appropriately and following the manufacturer's installation instructions is critical for that, which is going to give you the linear feet needed for each support, and then also the max temperatures. Typically max temperature on PVC is going to be about 60 degree, 140. So really not used for your high temperature. It does have great chemical resistance when we're talking about um, certain applications. Looking at the ABS side, it's a little bit of a stronger product. They've got, improved impact resistance. Again, great performance in low temperature applications. So neither of these are really great for our commercial kitchen applications. Um, but in general applications, great for your DWV. And in some cases, depending on the standard rating, different versions of PVC, different versions of ABS are going to meet different standard ratings. If they have the NSF certification, then you can use it for potable water. But really, it's going to come down to each individual line for each of these products. So just look for those codes and standards is probably the most important piece. Looking more at that distribution side, copper is still one of the top used products. It's great for potable supply. You've got type K, type L, and the different ratings that go for each of them. One of the great, elements of copper that makes it so universal as a material is the innate bacterial growth. So, for Legionella mitigation, it's a terrific product for that, preventing bacterial growth within your piping. There's no risk of the leaching, and compared to some of the plastic options, it handles thermal expansion really well. Now, the downside of that is the installation cost of all these fittings. It's reliant more upon the plumber to properly install. You can have terrific, clean, beautiful piping with copper from experienced, and then you can also have challenges where maybe there's not been a proper connection made. Looking more at the flexibility of installation, we bring ourselves to PEX. PEX is, the technical term, your cross-link polyethylene. This has been around 20, 30 years at this point, and is often used for in-suite distribution. Riser applications, not as common. Getting up to that larger line size, there's pressure concerns, and the feet ahead at the bottom of the riser can overflow or exceed the pressure rating on the pipe and fittings. But using long continuous run, PEX is fantastic because it eliminates a significant portion of fittings, reduces the amount of time and effort from the plumber on site. Anytime we're reducing the number of fittings, we're also reducing the risk of leaks, and reducing our installation cost. One of the interesting parts that we covered was kind of the misconception that's in the industry about PEX A, B, and C. A lot of people view it as like a rating system. You got an A grade or a B grade. That's not the really how it's graded. Um, Really, again, what we're looking for in our specs is the standard that the products meet. So going, whichever type of application you're looking for, getting the correct standard. And we've listed them out here, your 876 versus 877, going over the tubing versus the fittings, NSF ratings for potable water and minimizing lead content, and then the pressure regulations around B137.5. And those will all be listed on the PEX, whether it be A, B, or C. So on the pipe itself, they'll list all the ratings that it has. And really, again, you're looking to make sure that your PEX pipe meets the 876 or 877 rating, whether it is PEX A, which is really just how they are creating the cross-linking. So PEX A uses a peroxide angle method, and it's cross-linked during the extrusion. Your PEX B is using the silane method with a moisture cure, and that's cross-linked post-extrusion with heat and moisture. And then PEX C is more of an irradiation method, cross-linked via electron beam. Um, they irradiate the piping, and that pushes the cross-linking. So there's a degree of cross-linking for each of these, but again, really it comes down to, does the PEX product meet the standard that you require? And that will tell you if it meets the pressure rating via the 137.5, and if the fixtures, if the tubing and fitting both pass the ASTM ratings. So that kind of covers a lot of our distribution side. Looking at some of the, we also spent a couple of different sessions talking about chemical waste applications. Uh, Everyone showed their pH tables and talked about, the ranges that it fits. And one of the key elements for um, chemical drainage, where you do have a, say a ultra low pH, is that you do need to neutralize it before passing it on to the city. And there's a number of different materials that can be used for that. Each material is tied to the type of chemicals that are passing through. So, you know, stainless steel might have some certain applications, especially where you have high temperatures. Various plastic materials or different types of other materials are great for leading to your neutralization tank, and then getting into very customized chemical drainage applications. Borosilicate glass is still one of the tops. Um, it's customized for your application, so it's great for fitting unique applications. Obviously, borosilicate glass. People hear glass, they think it might be, not durable. This is very heavy duty, thick lab grade glass, so you could, practically hit it with a hammer and it's going to be fine. Great thermal stability, low expansion, great for handling high temp flushes, and really, again, this is going from the point of high acidity to your neutralization tank. So it's part of a complete engineered system. And that's one of the key aspects for these specialty applications. Again, though, our key element is understanding what fluids we're concerned with, how they react to the different materials, and what are the codes and standards. And as long as the product meets the codes and standards, then you're fine. So a bit of a kind of summary slide here, talking about the different types of products and where they fit best, highlighting some of the key elements like the code ratings that are critical, and then our pressure rating, temperature rating are two of the most important elements. So again, highlighting ductile iron going up to the high temperatures, meeting high pressures, but not used for pressurized pipe, um, copper, and all the same parts. I'm focusing on the corrosion waste suitability. So, Rebecca, which pipe do you choose?
All of them. No. Um, so some of the things that we talked about are really along the left-hand side of this chart here. So your selection factor, I'm gonna start from the bottom up. So if you have a specialty application, so we were just talking about acid waste, as an example, would require that. I'm not sure how often engineers think of budget, or we focus more on application, but it is an option. Potable water, absolutely. Dependent again where you're putting this. The temperature and the specifics. So just to give you an idea, when we talk about Cast iron, I think their highest temperature is 100 degrees Celsius versus PEX is 60. And I would say probably 20 years ago, who cared? Nobody thought how often you're going to hit those types of temperatures. But with the heat that we're seeing nowadays, I feel like this could be a possibility where we do get to some scorching heats. But we have so different high temperature options. Corrosive waste kind of also goes into that specialty application. Any sound performance concerns, and then your actual speed to install. Um,
Well, and I want to comment as well for that high temperature, you know, in certain applications, say healthcare, long-term care, where you're doing a high temp flush to control for Legionella, and even in general, we are distributing at higher temperatures these days than we did in the 90s or early aughts to control against Legionella for even your most regular applications. But in healthcare, where you might see a 180-degree spike, 180 Fahrenheit spike, then having those high temperature performance products is critical. Same with, high temperature for stainless steel was extremely relevant for certain food preparation or brewery applications where you are having a dump load of high temperature to your drainage, and it needs to be able to handle that without causing cracking in the surrounding area.
and I think the important, especially when you're talking healthcare and certain buildings, you almost have to look at the application per portion of the building or section of the building, because you don't need to have the same uniform pipe across the entire building. You can do something that's specific to the floor and then something different for the stacks, right? Or just a certain section, your commercial kitchen, um, maybe where your janitor closets are, because that's, or maybe the lab spaces, because that's where they're dumping the chemicals. Um, so don't think of this kind of uh, not a rubric, but kind of guide is really specific to the space. It doesn't have to be specific to the entire project, because portions will have something different.
Yeah, great point.
And then in terms of costing, we kind of just wanted to give you an idea um, of the costing associated to it, which kind of also aligns not just the physical cost of material, but also we're talking about the installation cost. So in the previous slide, we talked about the time, obviously, to install. Some of them were very slow, which then makes sense here because not only is the material more expensive, but the actual installation cost is also much higher. So it takes longer to do. Um, so recycling content, I did a little bit more research because a lot of um our presenters over the past couple of weeks talked about some of the recycled content. Um, I want to say, and there was a big conversation around domestic manufacturers versus non-domestic manufacturers. And I confirmed some of these details. The number is, I think, 95% of domestic manufacturers, sorry, 95% recycled content from some domestic manufacturers. And I think I saw as high as maybe 60 or 65 for some of the non-domestic manufacturers. So if environmental footprint is important to the organization, is important to the customer, is important to the project overall, it's something to look into for especially if you're looking at cast iron piping.
I mean, the battle that we see every single time we help out with a lead project, every point matters. We battle over minutia in flow rates to make sure that we are providing, faucets and showers and flush valves that help meet. This is another lead point that can be pursued. So the distance from a location to the project is one lead point. There's recycled content lead points. So keep that in mind as you are going through. Any questions on kind of the product side so far, Rebecca, or do we want to dive straight into what we're seeing in terms of specs today in the market?
No question so far, Zach.
Perfect.
So what are we seeing in specs today? I think the best one is out-of-date product selections. There are manufacturers that are showing up in specifications that went out of business right before COVID. So we're talking 6 years ago. They are no longer there. It's probably, and it's to a certain extent, I understand this is a lot of time. It could be a set it and forget it. You have a mastered standard, and you don't really look at it that often unless there's a specific application change. But even then, you still might have your standards for if there's an acid waste. But it's still something important to take a look at because as we've seen, probably 10 to 20% of the specs have some old, outdated manufacturers still in them, specifically to the pipe section. Um, I'm not talking about some of the other portions of the work that an engineer might do. The codes and standards, we've seen a little bit of kind of either not all the standards listed, or maybe an older version of a standard. And again, we assume this probably has more to do with masters not being updated, because again, assumption, we don't believe that they're being written every single project. It is being pulled from a master. Um,
And I'll just comment on that as well. Another part that we heard from the manufacturers, a big concern is products that may have passed, say, a CSA standard, but they're referencing a standard from 10 years ago and have not kept up to date. So that is a significant cause for concern and always worth double checking and making sure that your specs are current and the manufacturer submittal that you're reviewing is current. Any other parts that you want to highlight on this one?
no, that's probably the biggest one. So in terms of where this is moving to in the future, some of the probably the biggest item that we've seen is how can we add some sort of leak detection, leak support in the pipe, whether it's uh, a full break in the pressure or the flow of water, whether it's just a leak. We're definitely seeing a lot of that. Um, a lot of conversation around prefab solutions and how piping can help, getting things designed. I'm going to call them offsite. Installed offsite and then bringing kind of shipping it semi-complete, um, which then has more around how do we make sure that BIM is really introduced here so that we can get all the sizings right, so we can do it offsite and very minimal work for installation. Um, and then we've seen some requests from engineers who are looking for more manufacturer kind of approved systems, getting a manufacturer's insight, especially for some of the newer solutions, and how some of the newer valves and leak detection solutions can work. So when we're talking about the Internet of Things adoption, we have seen some come through, especially in the last maybe 3 years. We've seen the big spike, and it's the guess here is, or the assumption here is that it will just continue to rise.
So I think,
So, go ahead.
did you want to take this or you got me?
You got it.
So one of the, not one of, there's a few critical elements that we've focused on as we've expanded the variety of pipes that are available on the ATS Spec Tool. One, understanding the various types of products that are available and where they fit, understanding the types of fluids, materials, temperatures, temperature fluctuation, like is it a consistent temperature or a change in temperature, and how that affects our material selection. But really, we've started to focus on more of a code-based, standard-based selection for these pipe materials and tying that into the spec that's included in your verbiage, whether it's your book spec, your schedule, however it is, but calling out the specific codes and standards and the materials that align with them. The other big change that we're trying to focus on is um, for a long time, I would say in the Canadian market, we'll use cast iron as the example. It was kind of just, cast iron is approved without referencing maybe the codes and standards, without referencing a material, or without referencing the coding, without referencing the complete assembly. So that's what we're trying to assist with, is helping people specify a complete system. The pipe, the fittings, the supports, even the identification, and ensuring that it's all included, calling out a basis of design and the approved manufacturers so that there is a guideline of what is the appropriate quality. So, in essence, to boil it all down, what are the standards that we need to meet? What are the fluids that it's handling? Uh, Making sure that we are calling out a accurate basis of design so that there's a proper point of reference for when they are quoting, and then a complete system. Those are really the key points. And then as you're deciding between materials, understanding how the complete life cycles cost versus just the dollar by foot. So, with that all being said, we've got our step one, two, three here from the marketing. But most importantly, I think, is the link to the software here. And instead of just a slide, why don't we dive into a complete demo here? Um, so, this is atspec.com. If you haven't seen it before, if you haven't, then I assume this is probably your first time. So, thanks for joining us again. ATS Spec is a free product selection tool that helps you make the correct decision and then get an appropriate product that is configured exactly how you need it, and then available to download in about 10 different free formats. All of it is paid for by the manufacturers so that we can provide you a basis of design and all of your approved alternates all in one spot. We've referenced the previous webinars. You can find them here on the Architects and Engineering tab. Go to the Learning Hub and then your webinar recordings. And then from here, you'll see, the cast iron coatings, the PEX pipe conversation. We covered corrosive waste and uh, borosilicate glass, getting into stainless steel pipe and drainage. And then you can see some of the other topics that we've covered, from code-based discussions around adult change tables to sizing-based discussions around water heaters. So, variety of products. If you're interested in learning more about any of these topics, either feel free to dive into the webinar. It's free and easy to access. You can also reach out to myself and my team, and we'll set up a lunch and learn for your team on the subject. The most important button on the screen, though, up here in the top right, sign up if this is your first time, or log in if you've been here before. Once you're here, it'll automatically remember your account. You can save your passwords, it'll get you signed in. And then it brings us into our dashboard here. You can see it's logged in as my Demo Eng account here. If you are in Quebec, you can toggle over to French. We have this exact same system available in French. And then you've got your key areas here on the left on the dashboard, where we can view our product catalog, see all the various types of products that are available on the system. Again, we've got 45, 50 different manufacturers. That probably equates to a couple hundred categories. Everything from the adult change tables to pipes and fittings. In front of the wall, we've got all your accessories, and we've got your basins and toilets. Behind the wall, you've got all your backflow valves, ball valves, globe valves, everything in between, water heaters, sump pumps, pretty much everything that touches water. And then you've got your projects, masters, templates, and quick specs. And you can start all of those here in your quick action toolbar as well. So in essence, we're just creating a folder that we can then drop product into. And the folders have different level of detail associated to them. So from the most heavy duty level of detail down, we have masters, which are great for your repeat work. They allow you to set a standard for your entire team to utilize, and they can utilize the master either in your internal standards. We have some firms that like to just download that master, put it into their internal process, and then people are using that internal process. And you can also use it live on the system to simply drag and drop. The most important part of the masters is that one, you can add your approved basis of design and all your approved alternates. So you can have multiple manufacturers, multiple names and numbers listed there. Additionally, it is all kept up to date. So the manufacturers, again, they pay us to manage their data. We ensure that that master is kept up to date and we push notifications to you if there's a discontinuance or a model number change or there's a new feature, a new element to the product that is important for you to understand. We ensure that that master is kept up to date and accurate for your team to continue to utilize. And you can take that master into a project or a quick spec. A project has location information. The location allows us to apply our local building code. So if there's a project in BC has slightly different barrier-free code than Ontario, which has different standards than Texas. Texas abilities code will be different than your California green code. So the different locations allow us to apply the correct rule engine. The bid date allows us to keep this project up to date. So if I select October 10th, 2026, up until then, I'm protected against any model number changes, discontinuances, or key features. And then application is our next critical element. Different applications have different rules associated to them. For example, in Canada, there's been a major update to the NRCan through the NRCan Amendment 18, which dictates the flow rates available by application. So a residential condo is going to have a different flow rate standard than your commercial office, which is different than your hospital, which might be different than your long-term care, might be different than your school. So select your application, and then we'll recommend the appropriate products based on the application. That's the level of detail needed for a project so we can help it keep protected and up to date. If you know exactly what you're looking for and you don't need the rule engines, then you can create a quick spec. A quick spec is just as it sounds. You're looking for a pipe. Maybe you're a bit more detailed, you need a cast iron pipe. We hit finish and we jump into our product selection. And we're going to see all these different categories load. You can see I've pinned some of my favorite categories here. I can search for additional categories like water heaters or filters. We can search for pipe and see all the various pipe categories that are available. And then we can click the tile to jump into the selection. Once we're into the selection, the entire system is about, again, selecting the appropriate options so that it's configured accurately. With piping, what we've learned over the last month, over the last year, is that again, the codes and standards is what dictates your selections. So if we want to toggle this filter by pipe standards option, we can search for all NSF rated pipe and hit apply, and it's going to filter it down to our NSF rated pipe. If we want to reset that selection, let's look at the cast iron B70 pipe, hit apply, and it's going to show us the cast iron pipes that meet that code and standard. So there's our general cast iron pipe and our edge HP for aggressive waste. Maybe in this case, we know that we're making our selection for our commercial kitchen area. So we're going to hit add product, and it's going to populate our fixture chain where we're going to select our T's, Y's, and crosses to make sure that we're included. You can choose the individual option or we can add the entire category. We got our hangers and supports. So if this is at the bottom of a leg and we know that we have a multi-story building that we need to handle a certain degree of pressure, that's when we need our 117K series. If we're just looking for a loop, then we've got our typical loop here. Uh, and then you can see again showing all the different options. We can hit unsized, add product, and we're adding the general option. It's going to then,
Zach, I
one
got a
second.
question here.
All right, let me finish this and we'll dive right in.
Good.
And then we get our couplings where we can select our heavy duty couplings. So again, we're bringing out the entire chain of products that's needed for this pipe. Of course, we can skip anything along the way just by hitting complete, but in this case, we might as well add the last step for our coil identification. And now our pipe selection's done, and we can hit complete or we can add another. Let's dive in now before we get into how we use masters and templates.
So, the question is, you talked a lot about application. Will the building class, when we choose building class in the project, will it limit the pipes that we see?
I don't believe we have any ruling based on building class of pipes. The reason being that it really is a complete assembly. So if we're talking and let's talk about a office area. Then maybe there's we've got our general stack, we've got our in-suite distribution, we've got maybe on the floor there's a kitchen area for your lunch facilities. There might be an underground parking garage. Those are all different applications that tie into an entire part of the project. So there's no way for us just by selecting that building application type to limit it just to that. However, what we do have is our masters and templates. And in our ATS templates, these are basically, through this tab here, you have access to your firm's masters and then you have the ATS templates, which are basically ATS masters by application. So if we go into, say, the multifamily residential application, there's all these different categories of your fixture selections, your drainage, the pipes and fittings, and there'll be the pipe that's appropriate for those applications. You'll also see, the HVAC, the snow melt, fire equipment, all those different types of products. Additionally, we do have our ATS Canada Pipe Master spec here, where it breaks down, supply pipe, copper, type K, type L, your general waste, your chemical waste, your aggressive waste. So we are reviewing a number of our templates as well to, make these a little bit more robust. In our parking structures, we'll be adding, I don't know if we have the pipe added in for this one yet. We have stainless steel piping, but that's where we'll be looking to add the Edge HP piping. We've got all our transition couplings and the different type of products. So the templates is more of where you should live to find those types of recommendations by application. And you'll see in there, we're actually working on a new commercial kitchen backflow guide. And we'll probably tie into that with some of the commercial kitchen selections as well. But again, the goal of this is to provide the recommendations by the application so that you can simply, this is my favorite feature of this quick access drawer. Let's say we are doing that condo application. We know that we have our PEX piping for in-suite. We've got our type K piping for our stacks and risers. We've got our general DWV pipe, and maybe we have a commercial kitchen area on the main floor where we have our aggressive waste DWV. And then we can select our identification, hangers and supports, and even our couplings. We just grab these dots and it'll drag all these over into the selection that we've got going on. And now if we want to finish off by adding, let me move this around, just hiding it. If we want to add approved alternates and approved manufacturers, maybe for our couplings, we could be adding, Husky is a big one. any of the others, you can write in your approved alternates, Champion or MyFab, and you can hit save, and that will include. And then you have your spec assist button here, which if your firm has set up your approved alternates, then you can just toggle the button and it will automatically apply alternates to the entire project selection. And then all you have to do, hit all the boxes, hit download, and you can download it in any of our different formats. Long spec, short spec, CSI 3-part spec, Revit files, manufacturer spec sheets, and even product brochures. Product brochures don't really tie into, uh, let's say that pipe is not necessarily often chosen based on the aesthetics. But if any of your finish items, the product brochure gives a nice larger image and just some of the key bullet points. So we don't necessarily need that for our um, pipe schedules. And I've pre-downloaded here because I see that even though I left myself tons of time, I'm already running a little bit long. So I always try to pre-download my formats just in case. So I did this before we dove into the presentation. Our Pipe Month webinar where we've got the configured selection, all the codes and standards that are referenced for the product, talks about the application, PEX piping again, showing the key items, cast iron, again, referencing all the codes and standards that are required. And then our manufacturer spec sheet format, nice table of contents, and then shows the manufacturer's individual cut sheets. So a little bit more detail and a little bit more dimensions than necessarily our submittal format. And then I did download the brochure, although again, this is going to be more for your finished items, finished goods. On the long spec side, all of our written specs, really long spec, short spec, CSI spec, they're just different ways of formatting the individual content. So this is our long spec format. You get the model name and number at the start, the various pressure ratings and temperature ratings, and then of course the key item, the codes and standards. Whereas a CSI format is going to list the codes and standards, materials, and then list the individual model name and number. And the short spec is really just the same thing, but shorter, more of a limited description for the individual pipes. Does that answer the question on the application specifics?
I think so.
So again, the key element is let's go to our quick spec tab here. And here you can see that ATS Pipe Month webinar that I was just showing. Once you have your firm's master set up, the ease of simply dragging and dropping from the approved selection into your individual project is the critical element. And this is true for pipes. We can do this for your drainage and backflow and pressure reducing valves. We can do your ball gate and globe valves. We can do all your fixtures and fittings. If you want a general use public bathroom, a barrier-free public bathroom, or if you have your internal standards already, we can build a version of that on the spec tool. It'll show up here as your masters, and then you will, as the owner of that, get notifications anytime. Let's look at the Pharma Master. Anytime this faucet gets discontinued or has a model number change or update. Anytime this emergency fixture has a critical update, your team can work off of the approved selection. So in this case, maybe your standard is for a stainless steel bowl. Uh, you know that your team is always going to drag the approved selection over and not get the plastic bowl that might be available. So that's the goal of our masters, is to push these updates directly into your internal processes and help keep you up to date and avoid the headache that everyone goes through every January, February when they start trying to update these sections. So let us help you. Let us make it quick and easy, and let us help keep it up to date and accurate. These are the people that can help you out with that. Myself, Andre, Mo, and Mel. We work with engineers all across North America, really, helping get them get started on the spec tool, helping them get their master loaded on the spec tool. We'll do training with your team in one-on-one and group formats to make sure that they understand the different ways that it fits their day to day. So feel free to reach out if you want have more questions. And then the key part that we have here at the end is just a quick recap on what we've covered with Blucher, SMS, RWC, and Charlotte. We did we called it pipe month. We went through stainless steel drainage and piping. We cover corrosive waste piping and neutralization with SMS, PEX piping and distribution with RWC, and then our cast iron and coated piping with Charlotte Pipe. So a bunch of key elements here that were kind of covered and spoke about the different applications that fit, the different codes and standards that fit, and helped understand what are the real differences and why do they work in these different areas. So again, if you want to set these up specifically for your firm, feel free to reach out and we'll be happy to do so.
So Zach, we did have another question around will we know when an update is made and what is it? So I'm assuming this is in reference to masters.
Yeah,
So I'll take that one.
sure.
So today, if you've built a master, if you have built a project, and there has been a discontinuation of a product that is in your master or project, ATS will email you to inform you that that has happened. And if the manufacturer has provided an alternative for us, we will go ahead and make that update for you. Um, as long as the project has not passed the bid date that you set up. However, if we don't have a replacement, or if it has passed the bid date, we will still email you and inform you and offer to set up a meeting so that we can go through those changes with you. So when you get those discontinuation notifications, don't ignore them. We are trying to help and give you updates. We don't want to make changes to your projects in case this is your only record of what went out to bid. We want to make sure that we keep that open to you. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think that, especially over the last, I would say, 6 months to a year, this has become really critical. Some of the brands and products that have been on people's masters for decades have had an update. You know, if you have a cyclone water heater in your approved projects, in your approved master, then it's probably needed an update. If you have a Watts backflow preventer in your master, then it probably needed an update. There's been a couple small tweaks to these products. Um, just recently, we've had a number of those notifications go out regarding the NRCan updates because there's some flow rate considerations that need to be addressed, and we don't necessarily have a direct fit or we need some guidance. That's usually when we reach out for a meeting. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. I did see at least one other that had a hand raise, so I'll reach out to you separately and just make sure that I can address any questions you may have. I saw the name, so I know him pretty well, so I'll reach out and make sure he's got his questions answered. But if you would like a deeper dive, if you would like help getting yourself set up with the masters or just in spec tool in general, Zach at atspec.com. Happy to help you. I'll get my team in touch. We'll make sure that it's a seamless update. So thanks very much for your time today. Thank you, Rebecca. Hopefully everyone learned something. Have a great rest of the day. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.